גם יחד. Ron's going to tell us a story.
A long time ago, there was a fellow named Reed. He worked on fires. He did a good job.
That must have been a sad
A long
era.
time ago, a very long time ago, across the ocean in the city of Paris, two little boys were born. They were born in two families that lived next door to each other. One family was a Jewish family, one family was a Christian family. As the boys grew up, they got to know each other very well because they were next door neighbors. Not only did they get to know each other well, but they played together every day. Jewish boy went to the Jewish school, non-Jewish boy went to his school. They would run home from school to meet each other in the afternoon so they could play with each other. And on the weekends, and whenever they weren't in school, they spent all of their time together. As they grew up, they became best of friends. When they were young men and went away to school, they would come home from school to spend their vacations together, talk about their studies, talk about their adventures, talk about their love, talk about everything. The very best of friends. And when they grew even a little bit older, they each married, and they each were present at each other's weddings. They celebrated holidays together. It was often that the Christian boy would come to the Jewish boy's house for Passover. That the Jewish boy would celebrate Christian holidays with his best friend as well. And when they got to be men, they each had their own occupation. The Jew became a jeweler. He owned a shop where he sold diamonds and where he bought jewels and traded them. But a king came to be in power in France who didn't want the Jews to be there. And in one day he made a decree. The decree said that in 2 days all the Jews had to leave France and that they could take nothing with them. They could take no money, they could take no valuables. Well, this was horrible. So the Jewish man went to his best friend and he told him that he and his family were about to leave. What he had done is he had taken everything that he owned and sold it, and all the jewels in his shop, and sold them. And what he did with the money that he got from selling everything was to buy one huge beautiful diamond. And he showed that diamond to his friend. It was wrapped in velvet. He uncovered it. It was breathtaking. He said to his friend, I'm not allowed to take this with me. It is the sum total of all of the wealth of my family. I want to entrust it to you. I want you to keep it for us. Should there ever come a time when we can return, I would hope that you could give it back. And with that, he wrapped the diamond up in the velvet and handed it to his friend and took his family and left Paris. Years and years went by. The Jew now lived in a far-off country. The king who lived in France eventually passed away. His son became the next king. And one of the first things that the son did was to declare the law that his father had passed about the Jews to be no longer applicable. He struck it down. He took it away. He said Jews were welcome to come back to France, and Jews were welcome to come back to Paris. Now the Jew, he was an old man, and his family was gone, and he was all alone. He came back to his old home. He wanted to find his friend. He wanted to see if his friend had guarded the treasure, if his friend had guarded the diamond. And so he came back to the old neighborhood. And when he got there, the friend was nowhere to be found. He asked around and found out that the man, his best friend, when he became an old man as well, had fallen on hard times, had lost his money, his family was gone, he was all alone, he was pretty much penniless. And that he no longer lived in Paris. Where would he be? The Jew asked. He was directed in the direction outside of town. So the Jew followed the direction and went outside of town to see if he could find his old friend. And there, after he actually left the city and was already in the countryside, he saw a tumble-down shack, a very poor little shack with the light coming out of the window. That was the shack that was described to him. And he thought that might be the place where his old friend lived. So he went to the shack and he knocked on the door. And slowly the door opened. Sure enough, standing in the doorway was an old man who slightly resembled the young man that the Jew knew when he had left Paris. The two men stood and they looked at each other, and it took a minute for them to actually recognize that they were each other's best friends years and years and years ago, when life was good, when they were young, and when they had some wealth. The man invited the Jew inside the shack. They sat down on low stools. There was no table. There was no bed. It was a dirt floor, the poorest of poor places to live. And the Jew said to him, "Tell me your story." He said, hard times have come to me, and I lost everything. My family left, and I lost all my money and everything, and I was forced to leave Paris. I couldn't afford to live there, and I ended up moving into this little shack and just trying to get by on what I could find just to eat for myself. And there were times when I thought maybe it wasn't worth living. The Jew was afraid to ask about the diamond. The Jew was sure that he had sold the diamond years and decades before to try to keep alive. But the friend looked at the Jew, and a twinkle came to his eye, and he said, "You know, one thing kept me alive. In the hardest of times, when I had to leave, when I was in despair, I could only think of one thing." And he reached under the stool that he was sitting on and pulled out a box. He opened up the box and took out the velvet cover that the Jew remembered was on the diamond. He opened the velvet, and there was the diamond. The man said to his best friend, "The one thing that kept me alive when life was so hard was the thought of returning this treasure to my best friend. I've waited all these years to be able to present the diamond back to you." The Jew was so touched that this friend had such loyalty that not only was he a best friend, but the best of friends that could ever be, he started to weep. He thanked him. And the non-Jew thanked him for giving him a reason to live. And so the two men embraced, and from that time on they lived side by side in two fine houses. Because of the diamond, because of their friendship, they lived long lives as best friends and as wealthy neighbors. Shabbat Shalom.